Live from New York, this is Spirit Matters. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Dal Gurunga, and I'm here with Kishore Chandra. Our tri-host Chita Gopi is not with us this week. So it's just the two of us and all of you, wherever you are. Thank you so much for being here. This is your daily little spiritual check-in from us here at the Bhakti Center. Hello. How are you, Kishore?
I'm good. It feels like getting back to reality. It's been a while.
Reality. Where's all the Christmas lights and the New Year resolutions, and now it's just cold.
Yeah, I'm actually happy about it though. I'm kind of done with the holidays, to be honest. I'm not the biggest holiday person. I'm a little bit of a Grinch, so I'm kind of happy that it's back to normal.
Grateful for all that cheer and joy to be done with.
Yeah, actually.
Get over it, people. You're faking it. I don't trust that smile for a moment. All the gifts.
Krishna, how are you this morning? Did you?
Yeah, it does feel a little bit back to reality, so to speak. The holidays, at least as all the holidays that I'm aware of, are over, and it's January. We're just in the new year. It's 2023. Yesterday was the first episode of the new year, and it's our 1-year anniversary. We began Spirit Matters in the first week of 2022. It was me and Achuta, and then maybe you came on with Achuta, I don't know, but then the next week we were with Vera in Puerto Rico, surrendering to the coconuts.
Surrendering to the coconuts. I remember that.
Remember that, totally. Trying to get Wi-Fi in the jungles of Puerto Rico. And now we're in New York. Yeah. How has it been for you this year being in the podcast?
It's been good. It doesn't feel like a year. I feel like it feels shorter.
Definitely.
Like everyone was like reflecting on their year and doing the all New Year's 2022 stuff, and I was just like, I was having like a really existential moment. I was just like, time is just continuing. Like it's like it doesn't feel as demarcated for me as it does maybe for others. But it doesn't, I don't know if it was like the pandemic that did it, but for me personally, it didn't feel like a year. It felt kind of shorter in a good way, not in a bad way, in a good way.
1 year ago, Omicron was surging and we were shutting back down, and we were wondering if we were going to make it to India.
Yeah, we were wondering if we were going to make it to India. Like being in Puerto Rico itself was like such a trip during Omicron because like people were scrambling, you know. So it just feels like, I don't know, I feel like I'm like dipping my toe into the normalcy of things, and I'm like, is it normal yet, or are we just taking a pause from the crazy? I'm not sure. But it's interesting. It's like the pandemic really shifted things, and then all the shifts continue to happen. And then at least my feeling is that there's this almost hesitancy on my part to be like, is this gonna stay the way that it is, or are things gonna get overturned in like another, I don't know, 4 months or 5 months or something like that? So I'm still like a little like, I
Not
hope
trusting
I
anything.
hope things don't get overturned. I hope things stay stable for a little bit.
Got it. Speaking of stable, we've got our Bhagavad Gita. For stability, Bhagavad Gita stability. We decided at some point during their podcast that we would just start reading the Bhagavad Gita. So that's what our do. It's our through line, and we're in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. When life turns you upside down. What was that? What was the quote by Gandhi? Gandhi Gita quote. What's that quote by Gandhi? For some reason it's not popping up in my screen immediately. When am I to find that Gita? Oh, here it is. When doubts haunt me, when disappointments stare me in the face, and I see not one ray of hope on the horizon, I turn to the Bhagavad Gita and find a verse to comfort me, and I immediately begin to smile in the midst of overwhelming sorrow. Those who meditate on the Gita will derive fresh joy and new meanings from it every day. I feel like that's the thesis statement. Like that is this podcast in a nutshell.
Hmm.
When doubts haunt me, when disappointments stare me in the face, and I see not one ray of hope on the horizon. That's sort of what you were talking about just now. I see no hope. Everything's gonna is everything gonna be okay still? I don't know. I hope so. Um, I turn to Bhagavad Gita and find a verse to comfort me. And I immediately begin to smile in the midst of overwhelming sorrow. We're just here to help you smile in the midst of overwhelming sorrow.
That sounds about right.
Sounds about right. Yeah. Those who meditate on the Gita will derive fresh joy and new meanings from it every day. That's a
Hmm.
beautiful statement.
Hmm. That is a beautiful statement because I feel like so much of what we're trying to find in life is validation and meaning and purpose and a feeling of belonging, a feeling of being part of something. And it's really difficult, if not impossible, to just do that on your own, right? Like we're social creatures and we need to be together and we need to come into community and we need to dive into these deeper truths. And so it has been really special actually when we introduced Bhagavad Gita, because I like that phrase that you use. It's been kind of our through line. Just whenever life feels too much, it's like the Gita is always there for us to kind of guide us through. So I like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you like it. We'd have a problem if you didn't. All right. Hare Krishna. We are moving on. We are in chapter 3 of the Gita. We are at verse 30 of Bhagavad Gita. If you don't have a copy of Bhagavad Gita, you can find one on Vedabase, Vedabase. Just Google it, and there's free online resources to Vedic literatures, including Bhagavad Gita. And the translation that we read from Bhagavad Gita is from there, from A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who translated and commented on the Bhagavad Gita. And so, chapter 3, verse 30. You want to read?
Sure. It says, therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all of your works unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. Interesting.
All right, Kishore, I need you to make me smile in the midst of overwhelming sorrow. Give me fresh joy and new meaning. Hit me. I'm ready.
No pressure. Well, I think that this is kind of a nice verse, kind of wrapping up things that Krishna has been talking about to Arjuna here, talking about karma yoga, not being what's it called? Not being in control or letting go of kind of like the fruits of one's action and working with just that love and devotion in the heart. But there's so many concepts here that are really interesting that are somewhat we could talk about them separately for a lot, but I really like this idea of because Krishna is saying with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, and with no claims to proprietorship. I feel like it's very telling of our time and from lethargy. Because later in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, he gives this example of a cashier who's acting in this way or who's in this consciousness. And he says the cashier may count millions of dollars for his employer, but he does not claim a cent for himself. Similarly, one has to realize that nothing in the world belongs to any individual person, but that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. That is the real purport of Mai, or unto me. And when one acts in such Krishna consciousness, certainly they do not claim proprietorship over anything. This consciousness is called nirmama, or nothing is mine. And it's such a beautiful approach, in a sense, to life, because so much of life, it seems like so much of life is concentrated on accumulating things. This is how much I have. This is how much I have in the bank account. This is how much cool stuff I have. This is how much I've done, and there's a lot of measuring going on in society. This is how much I've done versus this is how much you've done. Therefore, that makes me a quote unquote, better person or not a better person. And here Krishna is kind of turning it on the head and just saying, like, actually, like, I'm the real proprietor, like Krishna is the only proprietor, and everyone else, the purpose is really to have a connection with that grand proprietor or Krishna, and to let go of that kind of control or quote unquote ownership that we have of other things. That's, what do they say? If you love something, if you truly love something, you let it go. And it's like, just think about, it's like, we don't need to get into too many specifics here, but every time that we've tried to control people or tried to control a situation to go the way that we want it, it never goes well. It never goes well. It's like, we have to allow, one way of saying it is we have to allow things to kind of just play out. And another way of saying it, a more Krishna conscious way of looking at it, is that we have to give space for Krishna's magic to unfold. We have to give space for Krishna's hand to move things along in our life. Because if we're thinking that we're like constantly in the driver's seat, owning everything, controlling everything, moving everything around, we're not going to have that like aha moment of like, oh wow, like this was actually meant to happen. Krishna's trying to move things in this way for me. This was a lesson for me, ... So I really love that point of proprietorship and letting go of proprietorship. But there's so much more in that verse. What do you think about it, DG?
I'm just thinking of the question of, when I read a verse like this, surrendering all your works unto me with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, no claims of proprietorship, and free from lethargy. It's a high bar. And I think that we read a lot about sort of the epitome or the apex of spiritual consciousness that we teach about and we speak about. And at the same time, how many of us are really there? How many of us have no desire for profit, no claim of proprietorship, completely free from lethargy, and are surrendering everything to higher power, to God, to Krishna? And so I wanted to ask you, like, what does it look like for us to be somewhere in the middle and to read I think it's important for us to read Shastra, read scriptures, and recognize that we exist on a spectrum. It's not that spiritualist, this is not the definition of this isn't describing any of us. And nor is it assuming that that's where we're at. And I think it's sometimes we put a pressure on ourselves and other people that we need to be this way. But rather, how do you allow yourself space to exist on the spectrum and create space for other people to exist on the spectrum? Like, how do you be inspired by this without being discouraged by it?
That's a really good question. I like that question a lot, actually, because
I thought you might.
Because what Krishna is saying here, yeah, it's kind of a high bar, and he's gone through this whole system of karma yoga, and he's telling Arjuna now, like, this is the way, like, this is the way that you engage, and this is what you do now, and you go and you fight now without any of this kind of going on. And I think that it is definitely a spectrum, because none of us are like really, really there. Yet at the same time, I think it's such a balancing act, and it's such a, kind of a negotiation, an internal negotiation that you have to go through each day, because I think that we shouldn't be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I think that's the saying, which I don't understand that saying, but that is a saying, which
Like,
means
who threw out a baby with the bathwater one day and they're like, "Oops, don't do that again."
oops, there went the baby. But the saying means
Where'd the baby go? Oh my God, I threw it out with the bathwater. Like, what? Where
it
did
means
those phrases
throwing
come from?
everything all out at once. But I think because the thing with a spectrum is that on a spectrum polarities exist, and it's easy to fall into polarities or extremes, what's the word I'm looking for, kind of disingenuously, if we're not in an authentic place. So it's easy to overly compensate for you know, I don't know, let's pick one of these, to overly compensate, let's say, from proprietorship, and just, you know, kind of give the image of magnanimity and I don't this and whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's also kind of easy to fall into a space of, oh, well, none of this matters anyway, and I'm just gonna like this and like this. So one has to like kind of know what the goal is, because if one doesn't know what the goal is, then it's easy to kind of fall into these disingenuous extremes. And I think that like in life, one has to kind of just like, at least my take on this is that it's important to know what the goal is, but it's also important to know like what one's personal, I don't know, like what one's personal unique journey around different topics in Krishna consciousness is like. Like for some people, dealing with control and letting go of it and money and profits and this and like whatever career, for some people that's going to be like super intense. Like it's going to be like crazy. Like, I don't know, they've had families that have drilled into their minds about career and this and money and this is what it means to be successful and whatever. And so maybe for someone like them, it might be very difficult to let go of this, and vice versa. Like all these points I feel like are going to be different on each person's journey. And I think it's just important to like remember that everyone's journey is going to look different in a sense. We can't really like be measuring ourselves up against another, like, ooh, look, they don't care about their career and are just giving up everything and moving into the ashram, and therefore they must be better than me at Krishna consciousness, and I'm so terrible and like this or whatever, or vice versa. You know, it's a unique journey, and I think that we have to honor that, you know, because everyone's going to be going through it in different ways. I think there's this blanket instruction, which makes sense. You know, I think we can all agree on it, that what Krishna is essentially saying is acting with devotion. But earlier in a few texts earlier, Krishna was mentioning that, like, you know, these things are going to look differently, you know, like for one person, doing a material action can look the same as another person doing the same exact action, but with devotion in their heart, you know? So it's like when I'm looking around me and I'm using that as a measuring tool for my quote unquote success in life, it can get really tricky, you know, especially when it's external things like, I don't know, profits and careers and education and body and like whatever, right? It's like I can be doing the same act, but with devotion in my heart, it will be a totally spiritually different thing than someone else. So I think that's it. That's my rant on that. I ran out of gas. Can't hear you, DG.
Oh, ran out of gas. I muted myself. Because I had two things. One was I looked up "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater."
Mm.
It's a German proverb. Das Kind mit dem Bade ausschütten. The earliest record of this phrase is in 1512 in something by Thomas Murner, which includes a woodcut illustration showing a woman tossing out a baby with wastewater. And there's actually a picture of a woman tossing out a wash bin, and there's a baby being thrown into like a river. So that's
a
happened.
real thing.
That's a
That
real
happened.
thing. That happened. Now that we got that out of the way, I was thinking also, I was looking at you read some of the commentary, you know, it's later on in the paragraph of this particular verse that we read. Srila Prabhupada mentions in the beginning of the commentary, this verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. And again, that verse we'll read that we've read, that we're talking discussion in this session. Therefore, Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims of proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. And it's interesting to understand that there's this idea of with full knowledge of me. So there's a number of things going on. I think if we look at it in terms of relationship, and so with full knowledge of me, meaning you can't understand God without understanding the living being, and you can't understand the living being without understanding God, because there's that relationship. And so understanding the relationship between myself, the relationship between that I have with God, the relationship with other living beings, the relationship with also material nature, you know, the idea that my wife has a master's in geography, and she did a thesis project on the Govardhan Eco Village outside of Mumbai, and the idea of cultures of sustainability, and the idea of sustainability being more than a policy, or more than just like a law that that we put in place. What was that, the big conference in France, or the Paris Agreement, the Paris Agreement, or like whatever it might be. But actually, like, sustainability is simply a byproduct of spiritual consciousness, of cultures, of communities that have a recognition of the sanctity of the earth as not belonging to me. When I have an understanding of God, an understanding of my relation to God, I also have an understanding of things in this world. And it's a reconfiguring of my understanding of how things relate to me, because I'm not in the center. And so therefore there's no claims to proprietorship, because the I understand the true position of things. And there's no desire for profit, because I understand who I am as an eternal spirit soul, and actually what brings me happiness. And so there is a desire for spiritual gain. There is a desire for fulfillment. There is a desire for connection. It's just recognizing what's going to give that to me and what's not. And therefore, I recognizing that actually offering things back, holding on to things, weighs me down. Offering them back liberates me and uplifts me, and clears my consciousness, and regenerates me. I was talking with our good friend Vera yesterday down in Florida, and it was talking, how was your holidays and this and that. And he has two young kids. Um, and one is very young, a few months old. Another one's, I don't know, a couple years old. And they were talking about like Christmas and the holidays and et cetera. And he was just thinking you know, he was like, after over the last couple of years, I was just like wondering what are we doing on the holidays? Are we just like bouncing around here and there, visiting this place? Like, what's the intention behind it? And he was just like, you know what? He was just like, yeah, okay, there's the idea of presents and gifts and, just like all of that stuff. But he was just like, what do I want to really give my kids? What do I want to really give my kids? And it was like, I want to give them the spirit of giving. You know what I mean? And so it was like, the idea of like, we're here to serve. You know what I mean? And so it was like, we went in the backyard and we were like chopping wood to bring over to like grandpa's house for the evening, and like cooking apple strudel, and like knocking on people's doors and bringing it over to neighbors and just saying, this is for you. And like, we're feeling joy and abundance, and we want to share that with you, you know? And this idea of like, oh, wow, like, moving from like, this is a time where I'm expecting something, and I'm expecting more and more and more, and I'm upset if I didn't get what I wanted and things didn't go my way, as opposed to like, wow, this is an actual opportunity for me to give and experience something. Like, this is a time for me to show up and share with other people, and that's genuine joy, you know? And so I was just like really, really appreciating that, because this idea of surrendering all your works to me, in a particular consciousness, it sounds frightening, and it sounds terrible, and it sounds sad, and it sounds like loss. But with an understanding of who we are genuinely as spirit souls, that's the hidden secret. That's the Chinese finger trap trick, that like, the more that you push a certain way, the more entangled you become. But actually, the more that you surrender and let go, the more your cup actually fills up. And so Prabhupada says in the purport, this verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita, because it's rearranging all the pieces and clarifying for us everything. And then I was planning to read more of the purport, but that's as far as we got, and we're already close out of time. But the rest of it, and maybe we want to pick up on this verse tomorrow. Maybe we don't want to move ahead. Maybe we want to stay here. But the idea of actually learning to shift that sense of connection. And if we can use this scary word, this dependency, this idea that I'm not acting independently from higher power in my life, and that actually all my endeavors are really meant to bring me closer in connection, and really this sense of being held, being guided, being being under the shelter of something greater than myself. Um, and sometimes I feel like a failure because nothing's going right, but actually everything's going exactly the way it's supposed to be if I use it as an opportunity to reconfigure what's really important, my understanding of myself, my understanding of God, my understanding of the world around me, and allow that to allow that to sort of just do a wash over me, and invite that to grow me in any way that it's meant to. All right, that's my rant. And Hare Krishna. You want to say something, Kishore? Or should we turn to Kimberly?
I think we should turn to Kimberly.
Turn to Kimberly. Wrap it up for us, Kimberly. What kind of takeaways you got?
Thank you. We're taking away that the Gita makes us smile and guides us, and that we exist on a spectrum. Nothing is ours. Understanding the true position of things in relation to us, and that Krishna is the only proprietor, and offering things back uplifts, regenerates us, and fills up our cup.
Beautiful.
Closing word, Kishore?
Please remind me tomorrow. I want to talk a little bit about this idea, because it's such a groundbreaking idea, at least from a Western point of view, like philosophically, that Krishna is simultaneously immanent in the world and in the soul of every single living being, and simultaneously apart from it. And the Gita will get into this like a lot later, but this idea of taking something from the earth and offering it back, and just this act that anything can turn into an act of devotion is quite revolutionary and really interesting, because when we look at kind of the history of at least this country, the United States, it's really interesting how a lot of what we see of why things aren't like that, or why there's so much dog eat dog, crazy competition, proprietorship and this and whatever, is just because of the difference of philosophical beliefs or spiritual beliefs. And I won't get into it now because it's a big topic, but please remind me tomorrow to talk about manifest destiny. It's very interesting.
Somebody note that. Kimberly, we're counting on you tomorrow. Kishore wants to talk about manifest destiny. Like the idea that like Americans are meant to like conquer coast to coast.
Correct.
Got it. All right. My closing word is what I said. I feel like I gave my closing word, Don't be attached to things going the way I need to be. Become. Prabhupada talked a lot about free from lethargy. I could be lethargic at times. And things matter. They do matter. Spirit matters. We matter. You matter. It's not about achieving my material goals, but it's about transformation I undergo in the pursuit of them. Hare Krishna. All right, guys, we love you. We appreciate you. We're glad that you're here, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.